All right. Today I want to discuss some things that have been happening in the news, specifically to do with an African company called Jumia. Uh, and I use African company lightly. So that's part of the discussion. Jumia is a e-commerce company, very well known here on the African continent, represented in several African countries, and it's an e-commerce platform very similar to Amazon. You can see it in their branding, in their layouts, in their design, etc. And they often market themselves that way. So Jumia is a company that was started by Nigerian entrepreneurs, and it was later bought by a German company called Rocket Internet. And since then, they infused quite a lot of money. So this is what happens when you have a mosque next to your house. Happy Ramadan. I'm not fasting today. So, anyways, it was bought by Rocket Internet from Nigerian entrepreneurs, and since then they've infused a lot of capital into it. They have expanded into other African countries and recently got listed on the NASDAQ, on the New York Stock Exchange. And recently, a company called Citron Research, I believe, came out with a study or some research that they had done exposing a lot of fraud in Jumia. Now, why is this a topic of discussion? Well, it is because obviously in Nigeria, some of the press we get, a lot of the press we get has to do with fraud. And unfortunately, that's a reputation or this press that we're trying to change. And what you have happening here is you have a company that's owned by Germans or owned by a German entity, yet market themselves as an African company and are listed on the stock exchange with an IPO, and now issues of fraud are coming up. And it's no surprise because you're marketing it as a Nigerian company, so obviously we're going to get the bad press for that as well, and that's an issue for me and for other Nigerians, I would assume, because, well, it's not an African startup or an African company anymore. We're not owned. It's operated in several African countries, but it's not owned by any African, And so it's an issue that I have with a lot of foreign investors that come into Nigeria, particularly, where you have a situation where they like the upside and the benefits of capitalizing on the opportunities in our country. However, when it comes to the press, they want to push the narrative of us being a Nigerian company, which fits perfectly in line with, fraud in Nigeria, when it's not true. And so, just for the record, Jumia is not an African company. Yes, it's operated in African countries, but it's not Nigerian owned. It's owned by a German company. And so, these issues of fraud have to do with the German entity and the German owners, not with any Nigerian owner. Those guys sold it a very long time ago. So, yeah, my issue here is that you have foreign investors that will come in, take advantage of the opportunities here in Nigeria or on the continent in general, and then when shit hits the fan, oh no, it's an African thing, and that's total BS. That shouldn't be the narrative, and so we're gonna speak up against it. So Jumia, whatever accusations of fraud have come up, those aren't due to its Nigerian ownership, because there are none. The owners are German entities and have been for a long time. So if people on ground know the issues you have with Jumia, but obviously internationally, it's been marketed as this Amazon of Africa, and that's kind of what the narrative I feel has been pushed to get this IPO thing going, and so now it's going to make it more difficult for legitimate African entities to make that next step in terms of getting listed on, stock exchanges, or getting, the good press or the good reputation, that they should get, the notoriety that they should get, because you just have someone that's gone ahead to push the narrative of a scam, a fraud, for its first African IPO, or Nigerian IPO specifically. And that's going to be a big problem for us in the future, because next time someone comes with an African company to IPO, everyone's going to remember the narrative of Jumia as a Nigerian company that IPO'd with fraud. So, Jumia, it was founded by Nigerians, but sold and is owned by Germans. So, it's not an African entity. There's tons of companies that, are operating in other countries globally, and they're not labeled, companies of that country. So why should that just be the narrative for us here in Nigeria, or on the African continent? And it shouldn't be. So that's my 2 cents on the whole Jumia situation, and let's make sure everyone knows that this is just not the way things are. Nigerians are trying to change the narrative of fraud, of scamming, of all those things. There are good, legitimate businesses out there doing the right thing, people doing the right thing, and we need to speak up more, because they're getting more noise, and it shouldn't be that way.